Welcome to Sparking Success with Opalewski. Aaron brings you conversations that spark innovation, cultivate leadership skills, and pave the way for your business success. In each episode, we delve into the dynamic world of business and leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and success stories that fuel your professional journey.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to Sparking Success. My name is EJ, and I'm joined with my good friend Aaron Opalewski. Aaron, how are you today?
Doing well, EJ. How are you?
I'm great, man. It's off to a great start. Recording early today, and as we do that, we've seen the uptick and increase in so many of you participating in episodes, watching them, sharing them, and we just want to start off by saying we're so thankful. Now, before we get into our conversation today, would you take a minute? Would you go ahead and like this video ahead of time? And the reason I'm saying ahead of time is because I promise you that it's going to provide value for you. And would you take a moment and subscribe and share this podcast, whether you're listening to it on one of the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, TuneCore, wherever it is, or you're watching it on YouTube or a social platform. Just take that time right now and participate in what we are doing here. You know, today, Aaron, we're going to talk about networking and how that has impact on not only our businesses and our lives. Yep. And there's positive aspects of that, but also there can be negatives. Share a little bit with everybody why today we're going to talk about marketing. Or excuse me, why did I say marketing? I said networking. I think we'll get there maybe, but talk about networking some.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's absolutely a good thing to do, right? But what can happen with that is I think people can, you can't focus all in one area, right? And what I see in some of these masterminds and networking groups is there's nothing wrong with the group in and of itself, but the person that is, going group to group, or, there's different trains of thoughts on this. I've actually seen it work out, for some other people where they did jump into these things before they had established kind of like a base or some success. But like there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
My advice would be, before you go join specific, like you could do some local networking, network with your power base, but like I would do that and I would focus on your performance. Mm-hmm. So step one would be perform at a high level.
Okay.
What I mean within that is like go get some customers.
Yep.
Do a great job. Bring them into your network.
Yeah.
Focus on doing amazing work for them to where they'll refer you out to other people.
Yeah.
At least one other people. You got one client, you do an amazing job, they refer you out to one as well. Now you got two clients, you doubled your business.
Yeah.
And try and continue doing that. Can't necessarily put a year time frame on that or whatever, but for me, and specifically my personality, where I'm very competitive. I'm confident, in what we do.
Yep.
And just in general. But part of that confidence is through building a track record.
Yeah.
A big part of it for me.
Right.
And so for me, if I was going into some of these masterminds like early on, I think that's where the shiny object syndrome can come in more.
Okay.
I think that just like there's great people in these things, there can be bad actors too.
Yeah.
And so number one, I would say, focus on becoming a high performer.
Got it.
At least I think someone needs to be bringing in multiple six figures a year before they should step foot in one of these things. And I'd go farther than that.
A local networking event or like a major mastermind?
I'm talking about masterminds.
Okay. And I just want to clarify for everybody real quick. We love talking about practical things that have been practiced, not just theory on the Sparking Success podcast. And you've been a part of all of those. You've been a part of free events, and you've been a part, I think it's okay to say, of some pretty high dollar masterminds and networking events. So you've seen all of those. This is, something that you've practiced. Mm-hmm. And your advice, what you're saying right now is you should be having multiple deals, bigger deals where you're making money before you get into those high dollar events.
Yeah, and I think you got to evaluate this for yourself. But for me, like I didn't step foot in any of the actual masterminds until I had made millions of dollars in business. Not in revenue, like actually take home pulled out through distributions, in my, personal accounts, millions of dollars of income. And, I do think maybe going in a little bit earlier than I did might have been okay.
Okay.
Because I look at some of the stuff that I learned in those early years, and it's like, man, this would have been nice to know at this point. And again, you got to pick your own number. Looking back on it, for me, it's like, hey, like, get to the $500,000 point in income, and then go join some of these things that are more like high dollar.
Got it.
But the first step in networking would be work your power base.
Yep.
Build your client list, network locally or within that client base. If that client base takes you nationally, figure out how to do that. If it's local, it's easier, right? You can go to events, you can put on events, there's just a lot of stuff you can do locally with your community or your client base.
Yeah.
Maybe your clients have events, those are good ways to do that.
Okay.
But the core premise of that would be the best way to network early on is going to be to do a great job for your client and get in a position where they will refer you to someone else.
Got it.
Build it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the one for one and let it duplicate
that is
itself.
Building a strong foundation compared to building something on sand.
Got it. I love that. A second ago you mentioned the timing of it. You talked about dollar mark some. If you're performing at a high level, is there other indicators that you've seen, or when you reference, maybe I could have jumped in a little bit earlier, that the people listening or watching today could look for to say, yeah, I should be jumping in?
Well, the reason why I went to the income one,
Yeah.
On where to jump in is because I've been in these things and I see what happens, and you have people that come in and talk a big game and like pound their chest.
Yep.
And, you got to be so you go into these things, and I think if you go in early and you're still building the stuff up, you're more susceptible to getting steered in a different direction. You might be on the right path, but you got to build it up, right?
Okay.
Well, you don't want to get off track or steered, and then
Be tossed to
it
and
really
fro.
depends on how confident you are in yourself and what you're building and what you're doing. For me, I needed to have more of a track record, and it's not so much about the income, it's about the income being the report card for like, how am I doing? It's the measurement stick of, where am I at? How am I doing? So, where I was farther along than where I recommended, from an income standpoint when I got in, I could see where it's like at that $500,000 mark. I think that would have been the best time for me to go in, because some of the mistakes I made between where I was and that point, man, I think I could have implemented a lot of stuff I learned early on. It's like some of it's like, yeah, you already know this, so maybe it comes at you, like you understand it better.
Yep.
It's like, man, that would have been really helpful. Like back at this point.
Got it.
But then you get into these, conversations, and I can't tell you how many people talked a big game in some of these things. I'm not going to use, I don't need to use names.
No.
But they talk a big game, whatever, and then within 2 years they're gone.
Got it.
Or they burn people.
Okay.
Which is worse.
Yep.
Just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I was talking, we had Andrew Goggin on.
Yeah.
And so Andrew and I
Awesome
were
guest.
in Arate first year. And again, lots of great people within that. But one of the things that he said in there is like, it's interesting to watch over that 5-year period, how many of those people are just gone.
Got it.
Gone.
Yep.
Or, in not looked at favorably.
Yeah,
Now,
I
there's
gotcha.
there's also people in there that are great people, right?
Uh-huh.
But you just have to you have to watch that stuff. And I think the earlier you are on your journey, the more susceptible you are to like predators in those environments.
Yeah.
So there you go. So careful about where you jump in.
Yep.
I think though there is like, again, to my point, I came in late. I should have put myself out there on stuff like that sooner.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because when you put yourself out there, when you get into some of these, whether it's paid, unpaid networking events, you've got to put yourself out there. Talk more about that.
Yeah, well, I think for me, once I'm outside, like I have introverted tendencies in certain environments, so I'm not really that introverted. But in an environment where I don't know everybody, or people, or not everybody knows me,
Yeah.
I tend to become like more of that comes out,
Got it.
right? And I'll kind of sit back and observe, and people will see parts of my personality that like you probably don't see as much in the day to day, because I'm
Okay.
more like go,
Yep.
go, and I'm a little more like laid back and observing in those environments.
Right.
And then I naturally kind of work my way into like talking more, because people like ask you about stuff. It's like, well, here's what we've done.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, like tell me more and all this stuff. And like, okay, I'll talk about it. Like, that being said, like we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
We kind of just hey, here's what we've done. Here's what we're doing,
Yep.
whatever. And then like that kind of gets it going. But I'm not going to be the guy out there saying like, oh, we've done, hundreds of millions of dollars. Like no, like I don't like.
Yeah, it's not.
Not going to be pounding my chest out there and
Right.
the loudest person in that room and trying to grab whoever's ever running the masterminds all their time. And if anything, like I'm probably, I don't know if timid's the right word, but I'm just very respectful of people's time.
I like that.
And so I will just kind of sit back, and I think the first couple RT Syndicate things, like I barely talked to Ed,
Right.
like barely talked to him.
Yeah.
Andy and I, hit it off a little bit, like because we were going in the elevator, and like I had a watch on. He knew the watch. He had
Okay.
had one before too, and so we're talking about that. But like, I'm just very laid back, and I'm going to ease my way into that. So same thing with the staffing masterminds that I do.
Yeah.
I'll sit there when it's my time to talk or share. I will do that.
Yep.
But I'm more like taking it all in. I'm not getting up there saying like, oh, we're the best or anything, because we're not.
Yeah.
We got a lot to do,
Yep.
a lot to learn, and that's why you should be at those things, right?
Yeah.
But I should have put myself out there sooner
Okay.
on that, because there's a time for that where it's like you get to a point in your growth just as like a person, and it's good to find the right outside sources and coaches.
Yeah.
And then I think like within that, you want to make sure that you are figuring out, you can't implement everything, right? But figuring out what you want to implement.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like a lot of times when people talk about networking, they network strictly for leads, business opportunities. Would you say that networking is more than that, or what else is there to it?
well, I don't use the word. I mean, we're using the word networking for the title of
Yeah.
this, and and I guess that's what it is. But for me, it's just more like interacting in a community. Like,
Okay.
I don't even want to focus on the networking part of it, or I try not to even like. In those situations, I'm not in there asking for clients or anything like that.
Yeah, you're more
I feel like that
surrounding-
comes off desperate.
Right. You're
You know,
surrounding yourself with other.
I think you should go into those things. Like if you go in those things and that's going to be like a sales funnel for you,
Yeah.
man, I think people are going to smell that all over you, similar to like, it's the desperate salesman. Like,
Right.
And you can smell it. You need to, that's just not the approach that I would recommend taking. You
Yep.
should find these groups where it's like, man, here are some things I need to work on my business, or I have this stuff figured out. I'm not sure how to kind of take it to the next gear. I want to get an environment where I can get some more perspectives.
Yeah.
Specifically if you're stuck within certain aspects of your niche business.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think getting in a group that is straight within your niche business is most important, because if you go broad, it can be dangerous on like what's right, in general or for another industry may not be the right approach for you.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway.
Now, if you have more general, like let's say you're struggling with leadership, building a team, like just more like general type stuff,
Yep.
then man, I think something like a more general business, mastermind, personal development, like something like that would be great. That's where you might do two. I'll say two rather than multiple.
Yeah.
Get to that in a minute.
Yep.
But You might do one that's more general.
Yeah.
And you might do something that's super niche.
Okay.
So,
okay. So when you talk about general, you talk about super niche, it would seem to me like there are either different approaches or different seasons within networks, surrounding yourself with different people. Why does that matter?
well, I think you should always be interacting with your clients, right? So the season one would be, I'm going to do local networking.
Yep.
And I'm going to service my clients well.
Yeah.
And within that, build a network because they're going to refer me to other people, either inside their organization or at others.
Yep.
Right? So that's season one. And that's kind of like should be always happening.
Yeah.
You never want to lose the pulse of that.
Yep.
Season two of that, I think, is going external,
Okay.
like we just talked about. But then, for me, here's what you got to watch. So once you do season two, and again, other people are going to disagree with this. This won't be something that everyone agrees with. Mm-hmm. But I believe you have to do this in seasons. So I'm going to go into that. I'm going to diagnose what I want to work on implementing.
Yep.
Because anyone that's done one of these events, you go to a conference, there's a ton of good information that comes from most of this stuff.
Yeah.
Or there's good information within it. There might also be some bad information. But there's great information that comes from a lot of these things.
Yep.
And it's more likely that you're overloaded with good things than there being, there wasn't enough value out of that.
Okay.
It's almost always the opposite.
Yep.
But that's equally as dangerous. And here's why. Because what do we talk about on a lot of our podcasts? If you're going to try and you got a bunch of ideas, right?
Yeah.
And then you execute none of them.
Yeah.
It's worthless.
Right.
Action is what matters.
Yep.
Execution is what matters.
Yeah.
And so for me, if I'm going to those events and, I could walk away with 30, 40, 50 ideas on what to implement. So then if someone's in 8 of these mastermind groups and they do this one and then the next week they're at another one, dude, I'm like, man, that person's probably got 500 things that they're thinking they're going to implement. And it's then they just keep going to those cycles. It's well, when do you actually have time to implement it? Mm-hmm. When do you do this? Some people will tell you, well, I'm out of the day-to-day of the business and, we have a great team, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay.
You still got to take those ideas and then put it back in.
There are, that's a great talking point.
Yeah.
There are companies that have that set up.
Yep.
Guess what? They're not a 7-figure revenue or 8-figure revenue company. They're probably, a lot of them probably aren't even 9 figures. These are $1 billion plus organizations that really have it set up where it's hey, I'm out of the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Not always. There's exceptions.
Yep.
But okay, even if I am out of the day-to-day, if all I'm doing is going accumulating these ideas and I have thousands of ideas, but I've executed none of them, that's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. So for me, I Arete Syndicate.
Yeah.
Did it for a year.
Yep.
It was amazing. Took everything, all the notes and everything like that. And it's not like you can implement everything right away. Mm-hmm. Over a period of between, so we ended that in the first year in May of 19.
Okay.
And from May of 19 to October of 2021, I was in an implementation stage of a lot of the stuff that I had learned. And then I went back in, so I went out of Arete. I wasn't going to commit to the travel again and everything like that. No issue. Great program, amazing group. Those are the best coaches out there, in my opinion. That's where you should be at. That's just my opinion. But I was implementing. Mm-hmm. And so we implemented a lot of that stuff. And I felt like we were back in a season in 21 where it's okay, now we've implemented what I wanted to implement.
Yep.
I could go, look, there was other stuff I could go back in and implement. I didn't get through all of my notes and implement it all. I'm hey, I'm in a season of hey, I'd like to reevaluate that, get in proximity of this again, and you figure out hey, what are the next things that we want to try and tack into the vision, the growth, what we're doing. And so I went back in.
Okay.
And then in most of 22,
yep.
22 is a year that we crossed our igniter.
Right.
Remember that?
Yep.
Like, okay, so I was out there, like that was already in motion.
Okay.
Right. So I'm out there and I'm figuring out like what we're focused on doing next. And I think the biggest takeaway during that year was how to expand and get more specific on what we were doing with the portfolio of companies. Now, fast forward in 2023 and into 24.
Yep.
And, what did we do in 23? Well, we went out and executed a lot of the initial stage of that, which was, we added 5 companies.
Right.
4 companies, sorry. We added 4 companies within the workforce solutions. I happened to also add the one externally,
right.
With the pizza.
Right.
So, okay. And then 24, what do we got there? Well, we're not adding right now. We're focused on now expanding what we're doing. Well, I'm still in this execution mode. So how long will that, and you're always in that, but the point is like, got a list of things that you want to accomplish.
Yep.
We've done the front end list of those things and like put these in place, but it's not just about that. I want to see it fully executed to a level where it's like, hey, now we're ready to, try and go out and add the next set of 7 companies. So it brings us up to 14, or we'll land somewhere between 12 and 14 within the portfolio.
Yep.
I'm pretty confident in that at this point. Well, when we're ready to take that next advancement, that'll be the next season where I'll be out doing more of that. Right now, it's like I know what we want to do.
Yep.
We do have our pulse on some new stuff that comes up.
Yeah.
I'm still involved in Arate and listen to the calls.
Yep.
I just don't go to the events right now.
Correct.
So I'm still learning, but I got it. We've talked about this. I'm not traveling this year for business.
Yeah.
I'm not doing these things because we are executing on growing the gross profit and the revenue of these organizations.
Yeah. So
how long does that go? We'll tell you when we cross that next igniter. That's when I think it'll be time to do that. Like that's the season.
Yeah. Part of what I hear you saying is that you've locked in on a network or surrounded yourself with a group of people specifically. Mm-hmm. You gather, I'll use the word gather. You gather the information that you need to come back, then you implement. Right. One of the things I've seen people do, and I'd love to hear your perspective on, Aaron, is it's like they gather just a little bit and then they go to another group. They gather a little bit and then they go to another group. You shook your head. Yeah. Talk to me about that.
Because it's an avoidance of reality. You want to avoid the results. You want to blame it on the group. You want to blame it on this. You want to blame it on that. You want to bounce from one idea to the next because you can't execute on the other ones. Instead of looking it in the eye. Again, I gave you, May 19 to October 2. That was 2.5 years of implementing. Well, and here we are. You're like, okay, all at 22, I go to these events. I was at a lot of them. It was fun. It was awesome. We had, Ben Newman come in and talk to our group at the beginning of 23.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, we've got the stuff we want in place. Like we've been fed, on this stuff. Like let's go execute.
Yep.
And here we are at about the 18-month mark on kind of shutting some of that stuff off. And it's not that stuff's not good. It's that we know what we're focused on. We're not straying. We're not going to avoid the realities of technological changes or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we have a plan, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah.
And we're going to go at it. And I think the people that jump around or go to, I'm doing this, then 3 months, well, we're doing that. Well, we're doing that. Well, I don't think they're going to get where they need to go. And if they have any kind of team, they're just like, they're bouncing. Their team is going to get frustrated with that. Because it's like, man, we
what's next?
Correct. It's like, and then it's like, oh man, they're going to another event. Like, like brace for them coming back because this is going to change again. So, and nothing gets done.
Yeah.
So that you got to watch for that.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up today, just with this question. What's been the biggest takeaway from your experience being a part of these type of circles?
That you can be super competitive, but find your ability to be collaborative. Sorry, couldn't talk there for a second.
No, that's all right.
You can find your ability to be collaborative.
Got it.
So, again, back to when I first got into that stuff, we had one company. Now we have 7.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most impactful thing. There's
Yeah.
lots of other things, right? But to sum it up in a sentence, that's it.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, thanks for sharing that wisdom today. For all of you who are listening, what was your key takeaway today? Go ahead and leave it down in the comments there. We'd love to connect with you. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's episode. And as you do, go back, listen to the other ones. There are 25 plus episodes and dozens upon dozens of shorts and clips pulled from those. We would love to hear your feedback and what you would love for us to talk about. Thanks again for joining Sparking Success. Aaron, I hope you have a great day today, man.
Thanks, EJ. You too. Thanks, everyone.